Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Sunday, May 21st, 2023. And I have a very important change notice to pass along to you about the Alaska Weather Show. If you haven't already heard, the last TV broadcast of Alaska weather, at least in the traditional sense, over the airwaves, will be on Saturday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. So on YouTube, we're going to be moving from at AKwx TV to at NWS Alaska, and you can go ahead and sign up on that YouTube channel now if you want to. We'll be posting content similar to this show starting July 1st. We are now in an open public comment period through July 30th, so if you have any concerns about changes to this program or any fond memories from years past, please send your comments to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. And if you have any further questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. And if you want additional information on top of what I provide in this broadcast, you can go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. It brings you to a map of the continental U.S. You point and click anywhere on here, and it'll pull up a forecast and any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories for anywhere in the country. Of note, in the lower 48 on this Sunday afternoon, we have frost freeze advisories up here in northern New England. This area of shaded gray, smoke from forest fires in western Canada causing poor air quality. In this area here in Idaho, eastern Oregon, severe thunderstorm watch, thunderstorms that could produce damaging wind gusts and some larger hail. Well, river breakup continues to be the big weather story here in Alaska. Ice jam and snowmelt flooding still possible and occurring in areas of the state. We are monitoring the Kobuk River at Kobuk. The water levels there are coming down. The middle and lower Yukon River, because right now the main waves of ice and higher water are moving through the middle Yukon, and then the lower Kuskokwim around Bethel, and then finally the Copper River Basin at Gulkana. We still have the potential for some snowmelt flooding there with flood advisories in effect. Yesterday, Saturday afternoon, Delta had a wildfire breakout in the agricultural areas. I'll show you that. And in Soldotna, there was a dust devil-like vortex that caused damage on Saturday late afternoon. We'll also be watching a gale force low bring rain and gusty winds up along the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island Monday and into early Tuesday. In the far north of Utqiagvik, we have some fog, temperature holding at freezing at 32 degrees. Over further east at Deering, there has been some flooding reported along the Deering River there. Ambler, further south, has clear sunny skies, temperature almost 60 degrees as of early afternoon, as of 2 p.m. So it's causing that snow melt to further increase the high water levels on area streams and rivers. Nulato, mostly sunny, 60 degrees as well, and it's that section of the middle Yukon that's of concern, especially downstream of Tanana through Galena, Koyukuk down through Nulato. That area there could still see some ice jam flooding, and then also around Bethel and downstream to the lower Kuskokwim Delta, flood advisory in effect for Bethel, and partly cloudy skies, 56 degrees. Here we have flood watches in orange for upper Yukon for snowmelt flooding, a contribution, pretty good push of higher water coming through the Porcupine River system. Here in the central middle portion of the Yukon River, centered on areas like Galena there, downstream from Tanana, there's still potential for some ice jamming to occur there. And then we'll be watching the area of the lower Yukon as we go through early and middle part of this coming week. And then right now, greatest potential for flooding is the lower Kuskokwim Delta, Bethel downstream as we go through the next few days as well. And again, this map just reemphasized The upper reaches of the Yukon are pretty much open water, no more ice, but you have snowmelt flooding now in the wake of that because we're having the warmer temperatures and the snowmelt occurring from the heavy snowpack in the higher terrain surrounding these river systems. We also have here the flood advisory in the middle Yukon. This area here seeing waves of higher water and ice moving on through, heading down toward the lower system, which the lower system has yet to break up, especially down there toward Holy Cross, St. Mary, and all the way down to the Delta. And then still areas of the Copper River Basin, even though the rivers have opened up, we have a lot of snowmelt occurring there, so potential for some minor flooding continuing along areas there, especially around Gulkana. Well, here is a fire that broke out Saturday afternoon in Delta in the agricultural area. It consumed over 75 acres. It's been largely contained, still working on some hot spots there, but that was one of the earlier notable fires so far this season. Fire danger is going to remain high even into the day Monday, especially here across the Yukon Flats. So again, just be cautious if you're planning on doing any burning. And then look at this dust devil-like vortex in Soldotna yesterday afternoon, on Saturday afternoon, just before 5 p.m., extending about 300 to 500 feet above the surface. It was enough to tear a hole here in the roof, also damage some property things out in the yard, such as lawn equipment and play equipment. So pretty interesting little thing. And they can happen here in Alaska, much like on a smaller scale version than the ones you get this time of year, especially like down in the desert Southwest. Satellite imagery shows we have one circulation here over Bristol Bay, another low coming up from the North Pacific, another low way out west of Adak. And there's going to be a cold front working its way from the Arctic Ocean into the northwest coast as we go into Tuesday. So here comes that low. It's still south, but as it lifts north tonight and into the day Monday, it's going to bring some heavier rain on the windward side of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Lagging trough, some scattered showers here across portions of the interior, a little steadier rain and snow in the higher elevations around the eastern half of the Alaska Range and Wrangell Mountains. On Monday, you could see isolated storm showers, some scattered showers popping up in the interior. This low, gale force winds around this frontal system, so rather breezy there across the middle upper portion of the peninsula and Kodiak Island. And then on Tuesday, that system just kind of sits there creeping northeastward, and we anticipate not a whole lot of change in the overall weather pattern. Certainly not as hot as it was last week in the Panhandle. The ridge that was in place has pretty much kind of been shrunk down and weakened. So we're going to be re-entering a cooler pattern, especially across the south and southwest portions of the mainland as we go into this week and in probably the rest of the month. Temperatures will stay above freezing tonight throughout the Panhandle and South Central. Temperatures Monday afternoon should get up to 63 at McGrath on the other side of the Alaska Range, but generally 50s to near 60, perhaps at Glen Ellen and Talkeetna, Palmer. Also 60 there up around Skagway, Haines, and then temperatures again above freezing for Tuesday morning with temperatures a little warmer back up through the Panhandle, some 60s re-emerging, and as warm as 66 at Glen Ellen. Still on the cooler side in the Anchorage Bowl, mid-upper 50s for highs. Along the Yukon River, this is facilitating that snow melt. Temperatures stay well above freezing tonight into Monday morning with temperatures 60s, even middle 70s here in through the Yukon Flats at Fort Yukon. Temperatures getting a bit above freezing even along the Arctic coast for a change. And we see temperatures again staying above freezing along the Yukon River Valley, so facilitating additional snowmelt runoff into the already high rivers and creeks in the area. And then temperatures Tuesday afternoon could be a few degrees warmer, lower and middle 70s, certainly possible Fairbanks, Fort Yukon, Eagle, and some of those warmer temperatures even nudging a little further southwest toward Galena. And then as we go through the areas of the southwest interior and the Aleutians, above freezing for a change for early Monday morning. Temperatures still a little cooler here in the lower deltas. The YK delta is generally in the 40s to near 50 degrees, but temperatures will be a bit above freezing then. Again, the main area of ice and higher water starting to push push into the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim basins as we go through the early week. So be aware, stay tuned to the latest as far as any potential flood watches, advisories, or warnings. This is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, May 27th through the 31st. We're getting no breaks here to warm up across the southern parts of the state. All late winter and spring, there's been a cooler anomaly here over the southwest. Not a lot of change. Below normal temperatures along and south of the Alaska Range, centered on Cook Inlet. So don't look for any big warm-ups here for the Memorial Day holiday. And precipitation may average a little above normal in the form of some scattered showers, especially across areas of the central, east central interior, north of Anchorage on up through Fairbanks, and going toward the Alcan border down through Chicken, Tok, and Northway. The rest of the state may end up just a little bit above normal for precipitation.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's look at your aviation weather if you have a flight planned early this week, either on Monday or Tuesday. A couple things we'll be watching. We have another area of low pressure coming out of the North Pacific. It's going to kind of split into two weaker centers either side of the Alaska Peninsula as we go into Tuesday. And with it, there will be IFR conditions with some gale force winds impacting portions of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Further north and west, a cold front coming down out of the Arctic Ocean will impact areas along the Arctic coast as we go into Tuesday and early on Wednesday. To start out Monday morning, though, broad area of MVFR conditions along the Gulf Coast, including the Panhandle, with IFR conditions there across the Alaska Peninsula just south of Kodiak Island. By Monday afternoon, we continue to see this frontal system with the low push slowly northeastward with some gale force winds along that, and we expect IFR conditions, especially east side of Kodiak Island, also pocket out back towards St. Paul in the southeastern quadrant of the Bering Sea. And then in the far north, we see IFR conditions associated with that cold front, and there could be some isolated scattered showers, isolated thunder across parts of the interior, south, especially southeastern, eastern, central areas near the Alcan border as we go through Monday afternoon and early evening. By Tuesday morning, IFR conditions rather extensive lower Gulf back toward Kodiak Island and on sections there of the middle and northern Alaska Peninsula, and then IFR conditions more extensive out over areas of the Chukchi Sea back toward the Beaufort Sea associated with the cold front. Tuesday afternoon, we still see some IFR conditions up there in the far north with that front pushing southeastward, and then areas here along the lower Gulf and especially just southeast of Kodiak Island, IFR with a broad area of IFR conditions further west of central and southwestern Bering Sea into the far western Aleutians. Pass conditions on Monday for Anatuvik Pass as well as Adigan Pass there up in the Brooks Range. Generally VFR conditions there will prevail. Further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill in the west arm of the Alaska Range, VFR becoming MVFR. Rainy Pass should generally hold on to VFR conditions on Monday there. And then as we round up through Windy Pass, Central Alaska Range, MVFR becoming VFR. Isabel will be MVFR becoming VFR. And then Mentasta Pass in the far eastern part of the Alaska Range, MVFR to VFR, but there could be some cumulus buildups there in the afternoon, early evening, north of the north entrance as you fly up that way, perhaps even an isolated thunderstorm. And then crossing Copper River Basin to Tanita Pass, MVFR conditions becoming VFR. And Portage Pass, kind of a split MVFR conditions, especially to start early in the day through the eastern half of the pass out toward Prince William Sound, becoming generally VFR through the pass Monday midday and afternoon. And then in the far northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White, MVFR conditions becoming VFR on Monday. Freezing levels aloft are highest here yet across areas of the north. There's a band of over 6,000 foot freezing levels aloft, and then warmer. It's associated with a weakening ridge of high pressure that was much stronger latter half of last week. Still warm high out there in central Canada. And then we see the bump up there of 6,000, 8,000 foot freezing levels aloft associated with the frontal system pushing up toward Kodiak Island into the lower Gulf. And we have the colder pool of air beneath an area of low pressure there where the freezing level is just a couple thousand feet above the ground. Greatest threat of icing will be in the vicinity of that low and along the frontal system. above 3,000 feet in the southeastern Bering in association with that cold pool aloft. Above 5,000 feet, Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait here going up through parts of the lower Alaska range. And then there are expected to be some showers, perhaps even isolated thunder. Could be above 6,000 feet here in areas of the southeast interior. As we look at winds aloft at jet stream level, the main feature is low pressure just residing over the Bering Sea. Cooler temperatures there, still a warm ridge out toward central Canada. And at 9,000 feet, we have some winds aloft a broad belt, 30, 40 knot winds pushing up into the Gulf. And then east to south winds across the southwest coast, 30 to 40 knots. And as we bring that down further to 3,000 feet, as that low comes up along the Alaska Peninsula, we do see southeasterly winds along this front as high as 40 to 55 knots going through some of the gaps in the lower Alaska range. So there could even be some isolated severe turbulence in these areas, especially near south of Lake Iliamna. And certainly moderate turbulence, rather widespread on Monday from Kodiak Island, northern half of the Alaska Peninsula, in through areas of the southwest coast.
Just as the sun is part of weather on Earth, it also affects weather in space. The sun creates solar wind by steadily releasing a flow of plasma particles in all directions around it. Sometimes the sun gives off a flash of light and X-rays. This is known as a solar flare. When massive bursts of particles explode into space, we call it a coronal mass ejection, or CME. When a CME is directed toward Earth, it hits the magnetosphere, the magnetic field around our planet that protects us. If the storm is large, we may even get to enjoy a light display in the sky called the auroras. In space, satellites may be damaged, and astronauts should take cover. On Earth, people do not feel any physical effects. We may lose electricity in some areas, polar flights may be rerouted, and satellite services may be disrupted. While these situations aren't ideal, they are rare and fixable. This is why we will continue to study the sun and its interactions with Earth and the solar system.
Longing for more space, open skies, and exotic travel? Then look up, about 30 to 600 miles straight up at the ionosphere, Earth's interface to space. Nestled far above the clouds but below outer space, this little understood destination invites you to explore its many features. Experience both the weather from Earth and the weather from space. Marvel at the ballet of radio waves and navigation signals, like GPS, leaping through this particle paradise. Sit back, relax, and take in the aurora, some satellites, and the International Space Station as they sail by. And you'll want your camera handy for one of the region's signature features, bright and colorful air glow. This daily show is made possible by the ionosphere's own swirling charged particles, because that's what the ionosphere is. It's all charged particles. During the day, enjoy the sea of particles, freshly energized by the sun. As the sun sets, this particle party relaxes and the air glow thins. Our quieter nightlife lets you gaze into clearer skies. The ionosphere is in constant motion, an amazing effect of space weather. Don't miss when solar storms rain down. The storm separates the particles even more, making this colorful region delightfully more dense in some places and stunningly sparse in others. And don't forget about storms from Earth below. Your weather from back home also stirs up this one-of-a-kind destination. Experience the unique beauty of every season, as changes in Earth's atmosphere, daily and annually, can create pressure waves, changing the ionosphere's shape and density. Venture to the equator, where our particles are packed in lush and thick. Cruise along a magnetic field line and see how the ionosphere's charged material also interacts with Earth's own magnetic field. Don't miss the superhighway of particles zipping out to space and back down to the planet. This unpredictable parade of charged particles can help you unplug and unwind. This is because the crowd of particles can garble the radio and satellite communications from home. The ionosphere welcomes you to discover more about this little-known region. After all, once you've explored this interface to space, who knows how much farther you'll be able to go.
When a star, bigger and more massive than the Sun, runs out of fuel at the end of its life, its core collapses while the outer layers are blown off in a supernova explosion. What's left behind depends on the star's original mass. A star roughly 10 to 20 times our Sun leaves behind a neutron star. A more massive star becomes a black hole. Unlike black holes, neutron stars are directly observable, usually as pulsars, the lighthouses of the cosmos. Discovered 50 years ago, they are the densest observable objects in the universe. Neutron stars compress up to twice the Sun's mass into a city-sized sphere. Matter is packed so tightly that a teaspoon of neutron star interior would weigh more than 1 billion tons on Earth. Still, the nature of the ultra-dense matter in the cores of neutron stars is unknown. Because neutron stars pack so much mass into such a tiny volume, they produce gravity strong enough to bend the light they emit, distorting their appearance in a way that enables the mass and size of the star to be measured. Scientists cannot reproduce the extreme conditions in and around neutron stars on Earth. They must look into the galaxy to answer decades-old questions about extreme matter and gravity. NASA's Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer mission, or NISA, will make X-ray observations of neutron stars from its perch on the International Space Station. It will give astronomers more insight into these mysterious objects, helping determine what is under their surface. A multi-purpose mission, NISA includes a technology demonstration called Sextant. It will analyze NISA's observations to validate the use of rapidly rotating neutron stars as navigation beacons for travel in deep space throughout the solar system and beyond.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back after our educational segment. And we're looking at the ice here across the Chukchi Sea along the northwestern coast through the Bering Strait. It continues to break up and melt offshore. Fast ice also slowly just loosening its grip, and we see more opening water starting to develop around Norton Sound and especially along the Russian coast. As we go further south, the pack ice shrinking and melting off here across the central northern Bering Sea and along areas of the south side of Norton Sound and the lower Yukon Delta has yet to completely break up, but it's in the process, slow one being the temperatures over this entire region have averaged below normal much of the entire spring, and we anticipate below normal temperatures, cooler, I should say, than normal temperatures over this area as we go through the rest of this month and probably into the beginning of June. For the Panhandle, inner channels, Lynn Canal, south winds 15 knots, 3-foot waves. For the middle channels, Stevens Passage down through Ketchikan, Dixon Entrance, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. The outer coast winds generally 15 to 20 knots out of the west-northwest with waves running 5 to 7 feet. On Tuesday, south wind there in Lynn Canal, 10 knots, waves a couple of feet. But north-northwest winds 10 to 15 knots, again middle and lower channels 2 to 3 foot waves, and along the outer nearshore waters Sitka down to off of Craig. Northwest winds 10 to 15 knots. Waves 5 to 6 feet, but winds turn more southeast to east once you get west of Gustavus and outside of Yakutat Bay, around 10 knots with waves around 7 to 8 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, easterly flow strongest here at the entrance of Cook Inlet, 35-knot gales, waves as high as 9-10 feet. Variable winds within Prince William Sound, waves a couple of feet, and easterly winds out of Turnagain Arm in the upper Cook Inlet with waves 2 to 3 feet there. For Tuesday, as a frontal system continues to slowly push its way northeastward, ahead of it, east winds increase to 35 to 40-knot gales there at the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves running 10 to 12 feet. Northeast winds 10 knots there within Prince William Sound, waves a couple of feet, and then the upper end of Cook Inlet, look for northeasterly winds of 20 knots with waves of 4 feet. And on Monday, Kodiak Island will have easterly gale force winds of 35 to 40 knots. Waves on the North Pacific side here, especially as you get off of Chetnik on surrounding areas of Kodiak Island, 9 to 11 feet. Easterly 35-knot gales within Bristol Bay, but as we get on the backside of the low circulation, falling off to the north at 15 knots there north of Cold Bay with waves right around 2-3 feet. And for Tuesday, we see winds still east to northeast in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, waves still 9 to 11 feet within Shelikof Strait, but winds fall off, become variable around 10 knots once you get midway and toward the south before winds turn back to the west, southwest at 15 knots. Waves generally 6 to 8 feet on the North Pacific side and 2 to 3 feet on the Bering side. Eastern Aleutians for Monday, west-northwest winds 15 knots, but once you get west of Adak, variable winds at 10 knots. Waves running right around 4 feet on the North Pacific side and 3 to 5 feet on the Bering side. For Tuesday, winds will generally have a westerly component, 15 to 25 knots through the central and eastern Aleutians, but turn more southerly ahead of the next occluded front way out in the western Aleutians, where they'll pick up to 35-knot southerly gales west of Kiska through Shemya on Tuesday. For the southwestern coast, look for Monday east to northeast winds out of Bristol and Kuskokwim Bays, and easterly winds 10 to 15 knots out of Norton Sound and along the Yukon Delta. Northeast winds 15 knots St. Matthew down through St. Paul with waves 3 to 5 feet. And then on Tuesday, not quite as strong a winds coming offshore, but still an east to northeast wind 10 to 15 knots off the mainland, and north to northwest winds from St. Matthew down through St. Paul and St. George with waves of 2 to 4 feet. Along the Arctic coast, winds will generally be west-southwest, 10 to as high as 20 knots here along the northwestern coast, and then southerly through the Chukchi Sea and Bering Strait at 15 to 20 knots, still with some ice there in place, but again, the melting and opening of the ice becoming more predominant. And then as we have Tuesday roll along, look for west winds around 10 knots from Wainwright all the way to Kaktovik with still ice in place, but south winds around 10 to 15 knots down through the Bering Strait and onto the north side of St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. So Monday afternoon here is that low with the gale force winds ahead along this frontal system as it pushes up across the northern half of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. And the low will make slow headway northeastward on Tuesday with that frontal system still in place and the strongest winds across Kodiak Island and the entrance of Cook Inlet.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.